Making a Murderer is back, which means many of us are about to turn into criminal justice lawyers. For those of you who haven't binge-watched the show, it's just the latest in a whole slew of highly addictive true crime shows.
True crime is like porn in the sense that it just flows into whatever medium is out there. High, low, whatever.
Shows like Making a Murderer and Serial, The Jinx, The Keepers, they are addictive, but they also get people talking about the criminal justice system.
I'm Katie Underwood, freelance writer and editor.
I'm Donovan Bennett, host and staff writer for Sportsnet.
I'm Stephen Marsh, random Toronto freelancer. But these shows are entertainment, not just information, and it's a really dangerous part of the world right now that there's a huge number of people who just can't tell the difference.
As great as it is to get people engaged in the flaws of our criminal justice system, we do have to take these shows with a grain of salt.
Shouldn't our crimes be tried in impartial institutions rather than the court of public opinion?
So it turns out our entire panel has seen Making a Murderer, knows this genre of kind of long-form crime reporting. And Stephen, let's begin with you. What is it that you like about this genre?
Well, I think what I like is a bit weird. I mean, what I like is the human portrait and the portrait of the towns. You know, I love this genre. I binge watch all of them. And I just find it like, you know, the true crime stuff, who done it, did he do it or did he not do it? I mean, that keeps you watching, but they're really intimate portraits of you know, communities, and that's what I love about them.
So the thing is, the appeal of these programs is unquestionable. I guess the question is this a good thing or a bad thing, that so many people are so obsessed by these crime stories?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think, you know, having the public be exposed to what goes on in the justice system can only really illuminate what does and make people more aware. I think it makes sense, having watched the series and, you know, seeing kind of the perversions of justice that I saw as a legal expert, because I've watched it. I mean, I think I would be concerned as a matter of the public, a member of the public watching it. But I also think that it makes a lot of sense that people would be interested in it.
Now, you have a slightly different view about all the attention and whether that's a good or bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not good for my internet consumption. The bills have been high. Yeah. But listen, I love it. I actually am guilty how much I love it. It is a bit of rubbernecking for me. But I do wonder, though, when you talk about seeing the criminal justice system, how much of it are we seeing?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's highlights. It's not actual real depiction. Law is painstakingly law, and there's a lot of detail. We're not getting all that detail because it's entertainment. There are editorial choices that need to be made. But I think we all think we're village lawyers, and we understand these cases based off of binging in 1 or 2 nights.
I'm just starting to lose my patience with all shows that, you know, create this entertainment information confusion. This distortion is really unhealthy. And, you know, there are hundreds of thousands of people who watch a television show and then feel perfectly confident that they know what happened. I mean, that's how poor their consumption habits are of media.
But who's the onus on, though? Because I don't think Netflix is trying to pretend that they're the New York Times or the Washington Post or the CBC. Yeah. They're an entertainment property, right? And I think the onus should be on us to take everything with a grain of salt, to watch and then research and then ask more questions. I think we should do that with our news, never mind our entertainment.
Ideally.
Let me give you an alternative view, though, because I've heard from too many lawyers here in Canada and judges who I've spoken to who are negative about even news coverage of what happens in the courts because they say it's so imperfect. You guys only cover certain kinds of cases. And my view is that you know, some good coverage is better than none. And when you have some good coverage, then that means you're opening the door to coverage that's not so good. So to your point, I think we have to hope that the public understands that Making a Murderer is not reality, but maybe, Stephen, it's a version of reality, and maybe it's closer to reality than let's say, Law and Order.
Look, you're a journalist, right? You come at but it's different when you come at it from the point of view of entertainment. If you're using entertainment to provide a lens on reality, you're providing reality television, and we know what the consequences are when reality television swallows the whole world, because we're living in it, right? Like, that's what Washington is right now. And that just seems super dangerous to me, even when the motives are good. even when the motors are unquestionably good.
Now, I'll come to you in one sec, but I should point out with one of the interesting things about Making a Murderer is the second season has now dropped, and they are making references in that second season to all the attention they got in the first season by various journalists. Take a look.
Making a murderer.
Making a murderer.
Making a murderer. Making a murderer.
Okay, so maybe there's a little conflict of
Why do we
interest
pick
there.
that clip?
The enunciation of making was outstanding.
Yeah, so Donovan lives in the world of sports, and so let's watch that again with a little bit of slow motion.
Making a murderer.
Making a murderer.
Making a murderer. Making.
I did not know I was going to be in it, and I was thrilled. I was sitting there at Saturday in my condo and tweeting to friends, I'm on Making a Murderer. So, putting that aside, there's almost a new genre of these multi-episode podcasts or crime shows. Which is your favorite?
Oh man, I really enjoyed Making a Murderer. I would recommend people not binge watch the entire thing. All 8 to 10
Which
or
you
however
did with the first season.
I did on a Sunday. It was probably the most depressing Sunday of my entire life. Yeah, I think I would definitely recommend it. I also followed Serial, which was great. And Serial was also kind of the thing that kicked off the true crime podcast fad. So I really loved it. I think Sarah Koenig did a great job, or as good a job as she possibly could have, given that it was one person telling the story.
And in both of those cases, Serial and Making a Murderer, it did motivate people, not just to get interested, but to demand more accountability. And sometimes it went over the line, as we saw at the beginning of the first episode of the second season of Making a Murderer, the one I'm in. They talk about how there were death threats against the prosecutors, who I think did a lousy job based on what I saw, but obviously it didn't justify death threats. Before we move on to our next topic, of this genre, what do you recommend?
Oh, the Jinx. That would be my top one.
Which was on HBO.
Which was on HBO. I mean, I just think that's incredible.
Yeah.
But Making a Murderer is also excellent. Serial. I mean, how can you not recommend Serial? It's so unbelievable.
First season of Serial.
First season of Serial.
Not so much.
I didn't actually listen to the second season.
Which is true of a lot of people. They loved the first one, didn't even listen to the second one.
Yeah, I mean, this is like asking me to choose between my children, right? You got the Keepers, you got the Jinx, you got the Staircase, you got Mommy, Dad, and Dearest.
You watch a lot of TV.
I do, yeah. As I said, I'm ashamed about how much of this genre that I consume. I may need an intervention.
All right, well, let's change topics now, and we are going to talk about a record in pop music that has been held since 1964 by one of the most innovative and arguably most creative groups of all time, the Beatles, broken by Drake because of this song. So with that song, Drake has the most top 10 singles on Billboard's Hot 100 in a single year, the most since the Beatles in 1964. We're going to put the list up of some of those hits by both the Beatles and Drake to give people a sense of how generations have changed. Let's talk about, I mean, this is, you think about Elton John, Prince, Michael Jackson, Justin Bieber, Madonna. None of those people came close to this Beatles record. It was a guy from this town, from Toronto. What's the appeal of Drake?
I mean, I think Drake's always had an eye to mass appeal, and he's always had an eye to being as relatable as possible. So even from his earliest videos, you know, he shot one in a Shoppers Drug Mart. He talked about loving his mom, wearing fairly geriatric sweaters. So, like, that's going to state a specific center of the marketplace. But even looking towards his more recent videos, if you look at Hotline Bling, it's like someone engineered that to be cut up into GIFs. Yeah. And there's also a huge dance craze around the song In My Feelings. So I think he's just known how to play both sides of the market really well and been cognizant of that for as long as he's been out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The appeal of Drake?
Well, he's a meme artist, really, more than a musician. Like, he makes memes. He makes huge social media events that transcend music and then lift his music to this incredible place. I mean, there was one point where he had 24 songs in the Billboard 100. So that means he's a quarter of popular music for a moment. It's totally absurd. But it is also a difference in the way these things are tracked, right? Like, it's
so streaming now, for example.
Yeah. Like, it's and don't get me wrong, it's incredibly impressive nonetheless. But like, it's sort of like the difference between a piece going viral on Facebook and everyone going out and buying a novel. Right, that's the Beatles. Yeah. It's just a difference.
That is a great analogy, Donovan.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a cultural curator, right?
Yeah.
He's a tastemaker, and to your point about the social media, when an album comes out, you know that a bunch of captions on Instagram are going to be, his lyrics, but even more so than that, I think he, to use a sports term, has figured out the analytics, and that, you know, when 1,500 streams equal an album sale, I want to get on as many Spotify playlists as possible. And based on being from this place in Canada, very multicultural, his music incorporates not just hip hop and R&B, but grime from the UK, Afropop. We saw Latin influence, dance hall. He's able to use the melting pot that is this country to influence his music, which gets him on a lot of playlists, gets him a lot of streams.
Wow, I feel like I've learned more about his appeal from the three of you than I understood, certainly before we did this panel. 20 seconds each to give me your pick. That's something that people watching should be thinking about consuming.
Yeah, well, we've already heard I consume too much television. I'll give you something else. BuzzFeed has a show with Netflix. It's called Follow This. It takes a look at their newsroom and how they cover stories about the internet specifically and the craze around the internet. It's a really good, tight, kind of 12 to 18-minute watch.
Perfect.
New Halloween movie, totally amazing. Grandma revenge fantasy. There's not nearly enough of this.
A what?
It's a grandmother revenge fantasy. You have to see it.
I don't want to go any deeper.
It's brilliant.
Okay.
I would say the show is sponsored by Netflix now, but we're our own network. I really enjoyed Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. It's a new Netflix series. It's kind of a foodie travelogue, and it does away with a lot of the food snobbery that's sort of endemic in that genre, and it's just a lot of very nice stylized shots of cheeses.
All right, they might.
So what's not to like?
Other than episode 1 of season 2 of, Making a Murderer. My wife, every time I talk to her on the phone, she's in Vancouver, I'm in Toronto, she says, The Rookie with Nathan Fillion. Oh, yeah. She loves that show. She says it's worth watching. I'm not sure what the appeal is.
Is it different than Rookie Blue?
Apparently much different. So, I defer to her. It's a good idea.
Not to be CBC PR, but should you not be pumping your own true crime series coming out?
Thank you very much. That's a podcast we have coming up in November, but we have more time to talk about that. But thank you, Donovan.
Looking forward to it.